What's up, everybody? Happy trade deadline from Guerilla Sports. Today's the day, Jesse. I think a lot of us have been waiting for this for a long time. You got to mute your computer. This is live.
I know.
Jesse, we're on live.
We're live. I'm not enough of a pro. I'm not as much of a pro as you.
I'm not a pro at all. But we do talk about pros, pro hockey players, that is, and there's a lot to get into. Of course, we're keeping an eye on the trade deadline as things progress, but in the meantime, there's a lot to discuss surrounding the Colorado Avalanche, right? I mean, very busy week for Colorado, and I would say I'm pleasantly surprised by everything that's been going on. I remember sitting here with you a couple weeks ago, Jesse, and saying, I'm not sure what kind of moves this team can really make to put them into true contention, right? To really put fear in the hearts around the rest of the league. I think they did that. They nailed it.
Well, so the conversation all season, going back even to last deadline, was they don't have any assets. They don't have anything to trade. They don't have anything anybody wants. And I'm completely with you. I think they have found a way, giving up what, in my opinion, is minimal assets. Obviously, we'll talk about Bowen in a second. He doesn't fall into that category. But, I mean, like, this team is significantly better than they were, 48 hours ago? And you know, then you talk about adding, Val Nichushkin, which, again, I'm sure we'll get into at some point here on the live. But, yeah, they took what assets they had, and you know, I think these have all been really nice moves. Like, in particular, the bringing in Sean Walker before you even sent Bowen Byram out. Like, they're literally plugging holes before they're even springing up at this point. So I'm with you. I think this has been I used the word masterclass the other day. I think by Chris McFarland, Joe Sakic.
Yeah, that Sean Walker move. I think right when I saw it happen, I immediately thought, okay, Bo's gone.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah.
Bo's gone. But yeah, I think from Jared Bednar's point of view, right, I think, like you said, they're such a better team now than they were 2 days ago, even last week. It's got to be such a weight off of his shoulders, right? I think with Jared Bednar throughout the season, we sensed a lot of frustration with this group, especially early on. I'll never forget his demeanor after that St. Louis Blues loss when he was just literally pissed off at everything. They got rid of the problems and added some new possibilities, right? I mean, that's the challenge. Everybody's excited about the moves, and you know, I think we all approach them with optimism. But we were in the same boat come the offseason, right? I mean, I even stumbled across a Nathan McKinnon video from Media Day, and he was talking about, I think these additions are going to be fantastic. Great work by the front office. They're going to fit in great. Turns out they didn't fit in so great. So, of course, it's still yet to be seen. I think Casey Mittelstadt's really
super interesting.
Super interesting on how he fits, right? Because just simply watching him at morning skate, he's a different kind of player. He's not the guy that wants to shoot 100 pucks a night. He's definitely that pass first kind of guy, and he even brought it up himself. He's like, I'm not much of a shooter. So it's gonna be interesting how he kind of fits, but you could tell his skill, his hockey IQ is just another level.
Well, and then we talked about it with Jared yesterday, at practice, of just having a guy who can come in that you can continue to mold and shape. And I'm going to pull this name just as the example because he was a guy that was, around conversation around him in the Avs a couple seasons ago, Claude Giroux, right? So like he was kind of what I was thinking about when thinking what they did with Casey Mittelstadt versus, maybe what were some of the other options out there. And usually you see teams in this situation that the Avs are in I liked the way that you said it there off the top, like trying to really solidify as contenders this year. Usually they go after guys that are a little bit older, more experienced, a little bit more veteran, looking for one last kick at the can to try to get a cup. And I love the fact that they said, no, we're gonna use our biggest chip, and we're gonna go get not just a solution for this year to take a run. We're gonna solve this problem for the next 10 years. 25 years old, Casey Mittelstadt, RFA. I think they're gonna probably try to get him locked up pretty long term. This coming summer, and I love the fact that they said, okay, we're done doing this. We've tried a couple different things since Naz left. And even to bring in Nazem Kadri, they had to give up a lot. And they just said, we're done doing this. We're going to go get a guy that fits into the age range that we want and we still think can get better and we can mold into our system. They found a way to make what would typically, I think, be an off-season move in season, make themselves better, and give themselves a better shot at the cup. These are the types of moves that you say, oh man, wouldn't it be sweet if they went out and got Casey Mittelstadt? But they don't actually do that kind of stuff in season. These are significant moves. The Avs, like JJ, you've done this for a long time. You've covered this team for a long time. Like, how many deadlines have we had the lead up to where it feels like, ooh, they're going to do something, they're going to go for it, and then they end up just kind of filling in around the fringes, and
I think last year you can point to was pretty underwhelming.
Totally. And truthfully, dude, even if you go back to the 2022 deadline, like, everyone knew Lehkonen was going to be a good fit, but he wasn't like the top prize on the market. And this feels like the first year where they're like, no, we're swinging for the fences. Like, this might be the first year where they'll be in those not that these conversations actually matter, but like, ESPN, TSN, Sportsnet, they're all going to do the winners and losers. Like, this might be the first year where the Avs could be looked at as like the biggest winners of the deadline. Yeah. They've been that active.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a lot to I think it was interesting that parallel you drew between the Kadri and Casey Mittelstadt, because they had to give up Tyson Barrie for Kadri, who kind of was the Bowen Byram at the time, right? Kind of getting pushed out by Cale Makar.
Yeah, that's so funny. Playing on the second pairing on the right side, pushed out by Cale. Huh.
Yeah, I think credit to the front office for getting creative with it, right? Because we knew it was a 2C they were looking for. You look across the league at the 2Cs that were available, or even the 1Cs that might be an option, and there really weren't names that excited you. But that's the thing that was going on in Buffalo is with Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins, is Casey Mittelstadt kind of slid down to the 3C spot. And the vibes I'm getting just from talking to Casey Mittelstadt, I don't think he liked Buffalo. I don't think there was an option for him to want to re-sign there. So I think Buffalo knew that and said, we got to make a move here. So I think credit to the front office of the Avs to kind of doing that investigative work and figuring out which kind of player is kind of out the door on their current team.
Well, and dude, like, I was kind of running through the list in my head the other day, and I think there's maybe a couple more than I thought. But, like, this was a true, the Avs got what they wanted and needed. The Sabres got what they wanted and needed. Two young players that haven't been bad. Like, they've been good. They've been positive impact players on their former teams now. But just, again, Casey Mittelstadt wasn't really, like, you're not doing anything there in Buffalo of consequence. Bowen Byram clearly, stuck in that kind of second slot. And it's just, it's a good situation for both. Quote from Mittelstadt from this morning when we were talking to him. One, he had a lot of great things to say. Head on over to the Guerilla Sports Twitter. It's on my Twitter. I think JJ retweeted as well. About 5 minutes we chatted with Casey Mittelstadt this morning. He was fantastic, had a lot of interesting stuff to say. But kind of like what you're talking about with just his fit in Buffalo. There's a quote from Mittelstadt this morning. That's probably the most I've sweat in a morning skate in a long time. Selfishly, what an opportunity for me and the team, I think. I played against them, and I hated playing against them. So definitely excited to join them, and I'd love to help them win.
I don't know if you remember, but when we did the podcast after Buffalo came into town and, Eric Johnson had his tribute video, so I spent a little bit of time in the Buffalo locker room post-game. And my report back here to Guerrilla Sports was, I haven't spent much time in visiting locker rooms, but that felt like a locker room that was comfortable losing.
Yes. Yeah,
you remember me saying that?
Yep, I totally remember you.
So I could see just the refreshing start for Casey Mittelstadt. That's got to be nice. But I thought it was also curious reading over the last couple of days that Bowen Byram kind of wanted to go to Buffalo. It sounded like it was a place he'd like, at least playing with his friends, Dylan Cousins, who I've already brought up specifically. So, yeah, and then you kind of see him last night getting a little confused on the power play, just trying to figure things out. So it's an interesting idea and you brought it up a couple weeks ago. Like, this had to be a challenging time for Bo, kind of knowing his name's floated out there. I think earlier this season it was also interesting hearing him talk about his discomforts playing on the other side of, right? He's a lefty, so he likes to play on the left side. He had to play the right a little bit this year, and he kind of vocalized that he didn't really like that. So I think seeing this coming, it has to have been a weird year for Bo, and now actually making the move. Yeah, I always think about players like that because you got to think they're on their way out thinking, man, there might be a chance I don't even sniff a Stanley Cup ever again.
Well, I mean, there's a couple players. One of them was Ryan Johansen, but the other one was Bo. And we'll talk about Johansen. But it felt to me like you could feel the stress and tension kind of like radiating off of them the last couple weeks leading up to this. Just knowing, I might be on my way out. Don't really know what the future holds. Sticking with Bo, his play hasn't been great. That kind of, knowing that every time he doesn't have a good game, okay, well, it just made me a little bit more expendable. I'm a little bit more expendable. I'm a little bit more they're fine parting ways. I'm with you. I think ultimately this is a positive move for Bo. Yeah, he probably would love to get one more run at a cup this season, but like he's going to be able to play a bigger role there. He's probably going to be a top pairing guy with Darlene. I think he's going to have a chance to run that top power play, be kind of like their go-to guy. But like, let's also be fully honest. Part of the reason why the Avs were willing to part ways with him is he still has several steps that he needs to take before he's getting to that point. And he wasn't going to supplant Cale Makar here with the way that he was playing.
Yeah, I'm with that. I don't know. I feel like the tension is definitely something to note.
Yeah.
Whether it's surrounding Bo or surrounding Ryan Johansen, I think there was a palpable tension in that room.
You could feel it.
And we've heard it from everybody. It's not of who they were, right? And Bo is excluded. I'm now moving on to Ryan Johansen.
Yeah.
Ryan Johansen obviously just simply didn't fit in the room.
Ooh, here we go.
Not from a relationship.
Matt Dumba to the Lightning. Just breaking. Saw that one was picking up steam, but hadn't actually gotten over the line. Matt Dumba's been terrible this year. I really want to see what the cost is on that because he has been terrible. Sorry, you were talking about Ryan Johansen.
No worries. Yeah, but as I was saying, just it doesn't seem like it was a personal thing, right? And I think for a second, maybe some of us were starting to speculate on, oh, wow, they just don't like him. They don't like him in this room. And I could say, I think confidently that that's not true. It's just it was simply X's and O's. He just didn't fit. And I remember a couple weeks back when we were talking about his competitiveness and it was improving, right? And players trying to buy into Jared Bednar's system. I remember a couple times specifically watching Johansen like, okay, here's his chance to play Jared Bednar's system. Yeah. Here's his chance to get it deep and have somebody go do it. And he would somehow find a way to mess it up, right? He would get it deep and it would ring all the way around the boards and start the breakout for the other team. So, yeah, there was just something that just wasn't clicking with him. And I think it's good on the front office for the Avalanche to kind of admit that mistake, right? Yeah. Same with Tatar, saying, okay, that was an error. Let's get them out of town and put something better in front of Jared Bednar. And, again, I think everybody kind of has a weight off their shoulders because of it.
Well, it's one of those we see people all the time, talk about the window and you can't waste these years. I think sometimes that gets a little overblown, but this was the Tatar thing earlier this season and them doing what they had to do to get Johansen out. That was them saying, we're not wasting this year. We're looking at what Nathan McKinnon's doing. Cale Makar, everyone's talking about him having he doesn't look himself. He's having another historic year. They're like, we're not going to waste this. We think that we have a group that can go for it, Gabe or not.
Well, it's also, I want to go back to Media Day again and Nathan McKinnon saying, in hindsight, you look back at that playoff run, and we just didn't have the team that we thought we had. Like, in the moment, you try to...
last year's?
Right.
Yeah.
It was Media Day. He was looking back at the playoffs, and he's like, in the moment, you're confident. You think that there's a possibility, but once it's all said and done, you look at the team, and you're just like, this wasn't the team to get it done. I think they didn't want to repeat that mistake. They didn't want to double down and say, hey, these are the guys that we have. Let's just try to make it work and try to pick up a couple pieces in the depth. Yep. They really wanted to be honest with themselves and say, this current group doesn't have what it takes to get it done. We have to make a big splash here.
Yeah. Matt Dumba it's Matt Dumba and a 7th in 2025 to Tampa in exchange for a 5th round pick. There were reports that Arizona wanted a 1st for him, and they end up with a 5th. The Ryan Johansen thing, dude, it's so interesting, funny, because I asked Jared Bednar about it yesterday, about what didn't work. And he was very quick to say he's a great person, great teammate. So I'm with you. I don't think it's that guys didn't like him, that they were mean to him. But I just think it became very obvious that it wasn't going to work. He wasn't going to be here long term. And I really do, man. I have reason to believe that there was some stuff kind of going on, stuff relating to on the ice.
Right.
That I don't necessarily want to say Ryan Johansen dug his heels in on, but that I think there was a little bit of
can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Right.
Yeah.
Stubbornness. And I think that led to some frustration because the trademark of this Avalanche team is cohesiveness, everyone on the same page, people are bought in, we're all doing, we're all pulling the rope in the same direction. And it felt like there was maybe one guy who, again, I don't want to make it sound like he's like not trying out there, but wasn't really pulling the rope with the rest of the team.
I think anybody who's played beer league hockey can relate, right? There's always a guy on the team who maybe isn't very good, but just a cool guy.
Yeah.
And not only that, he's reliable. He shows up every game, even in the 10:30s. So it's like, but every time you're on the ice with him, it feels like you're on a penalty kill. Or every time he gets the puck, you're like, okay, he's going to do something bad with it. It may or may not be me on one of my teams. But it's kind of that same feel, right? They're just a better team without him. And it's obvious that the rest of the NHL is kind of in agreement, right?
Yeah.
The fact that it was really probably tough for them to find someone to take that contract. They find Philadelphia, and Philadelphia immediately waives him.
What did you think of them waiving him?
I guess my initial thought was just what's going through his mind. Is he starting to think, oh, wow, maybe my career is starting to come to a close a lot quicker than I thought it was. And then obviously you make the parallel with Torts there, right? And you're like, okay, there's some familiarity between those two guys, and maybe it was just Tortorella being like, no, thank you. I need a guy who's going to forecheck and backcheck and, make the right play. So I think there was just something to that, but I was curious why Philadelphia felt so inclined to do the Avalanche such a nice favor.
Well, I mean, they get a first-round pick out of it, and I actually like that bit of business for the Flyers because they're having a good year, but, like, Sean Walker even admitted it to us yesterday. Even they were kind of surprised by how this season was going for them. And I think that's management for Philadelphia being realistic with where they're at and saying, we still need to be stockpiling draft picks and prospects and things like that. This is a great year. We're not going to sell, but, we're going to be cautious with how we're approaching stuff. Then, they go out and add Eric Johnson today, which is a move. But I actually like that for Philadelphia. Philadelphia being willing to do that. Take the first-round pick to move out a player that they maybe weren't going to be able to keep. I think that's realistic. I found it interesting that was how they felt about Ryan Johansen. Get him out. We don't need him here. Don't want him here. Like, to me, I thought that was at bare minimum an interesting guy to keep around as a 4C or your 13th forward because he's been around to see if. And now I guess this is kind of what you were saying. We've been waiting for it all season. Like, I don't know, see if getting traded for nothing gets, a fire lit under him. I don't know. Do you think he reports? Like, do you think he shows up to Lehigh Valley?
That's kind of where I was questioning what's going through his mind, right? Because if he's coming to terms with, like, okay, my NHL career is coming to a close, then no.
No, you just hang
But
him
if
up.
there's still hope for him and he in his mind he's like, I want to get out there and prove that I'm not completely toast.
Yeah.
But I think that's the opportunity he had here, right? Was to kind of say, hey, I'm still adequate.
Well, and what's got to be tough for him, and I mean, I don't know, maybe he's not looking at it this way. Maybe he's, I'd love to get Ryan Johansen's side of the story. But, like, what I imagine has to be hard if you're, in this case, the Philadelphia Flyers or any other team, looking at keeping him, is like this was going to be his best opportunity. Like, he came in, they were like, yep, that's our 2C. Put Val Nichushkin and Mikko Rantanen next to him. That's our 2C. And he fumbled it quickly. As soon as that, and you were the one who kind of called it out, because he scored a handful of goals in those first 10 games. And it was like, hey, look, he doesn't look great out there, but if he's going to fucking pot a goal every 3 games and, put 2 in every now and then, who cares? And that just, once that dried up, which it did quickly, it was like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah. They gave him every opportunity, right? If you remember at the start of the year, he was on PP1.
Yep.
I remember you and I talking to Nathan McKinnon about the importance of his face-offs on Power Play 1. Slowly trickles down. By the end of it, he's not even on PP2 anymore, right? And I think alarms were really raised for me when you and I were kind of discussing a Ryan Johansen face-off piece, right? So we're starting to build it. We're starting to ask people questions, and I asked Jared Bednar about how good he thought Ryan Johansen was at face-offs, and he's like, hey, he's okay.
Good.
Yeah. And that's where I was like, okay, maybe they don't love Ryan Johansen as much as we're thinking. So, tough to see a guy like that go. I think there was a lot of hope, a lot of promise, because even Nashville Predator reporters were saying, hey, this guy's going to crush it in Colorado. He's going to be so great. So I think a lot of us caught off guard. Like I said, we'll see how Casey Mittelstadt's fit actually develops and unfolds. But let's get into Sean Walker, since he's the return piece for Ryan Johansen.
Yep. We had a question come through about Duhaime. Do y'all think Duhaime will be more like a 13th forward? I do think that if the Avs get into the playoffs, I'm looking at Duhaime as kind of like the Nico Sturm piece. Where I think he's going to be situational, used in certain matchups that the Avs like. But I think he'll be. Wow, Jack Roslovic from Columbus to New York. That's a big one. I think he'll be 13th forward, spot duty when the Avs need a heavier matchup.
I love asking players about themselves, what they bring to the table, right? I think that's one of the best questions, because you really get to pick their brain on what they think they're good at. And not only that, you kind of hear the echo of the coaching staff, right? What they've talked to them about. And so what I really liked about Brandon Duhaime, again, check it out on Guerilla Sports if you haven't seen his full interview from this morning, but him bringing up just his in-your-face style, right? The high effort, and I'm just like, Jared Bednar guy. Right when he said that, I was like, now I understand the move. Because Jared Bednar loves that little bit of grit, loves that little bit of sandpaper. He's got a little bit of Tortorella in him,
Well, and it's funny you said, I hadn't put that in. Both the moves they made yesterday, Yakov Trenin and Tortorella, Jared Bednar described them both today as guys that play with some sandpaper. Yeah, dude, it is funny. Like, it's, as you watch these trades, not just at this deadline, but anytime the Avs bring in guys, it's pretty easy to, put the link to like, oh, that's why they, that makes sense. And again, we're transitioning to Sean Walker, who another one that I think makes a lot of sense, in those types of ways. But oh damn, I completely lost my train of thought there. Oh, the face-offs. Like, again, with Ryan Johansen, it was like, yes, we see the direct correlation for why they would bring in a guy like this. It just seems like the Avs don't make just random moves. It's maybe even a little bit what made the Tomas Tatar one, when it didn't work out, you're like, yeah, I get that. That was the one that we couldn't draw the straight line to.
Yeah, I think there's 3 things that Jared Bednar loves, or I guess maybe just the Avalanche organization. Former captains.
Yes. Yeah.
Checkers, and penalty killers, right?
What did Jared Bednar say? Was it yesterday, 2 days ago? We were talking about, bringing in new players, and he goes, it's checking details. We'll get system stuff and offense stuff later. We want to drill down on their checking and defending details. So, yeah, when you see players that come in that have a strong track record on that to begin with, makes a lot of sense. Got 6 minutes to the deadline here. Good thing to keep in mind, folks, is that deals can come in after the deadline passes, as long as teams are in the Central Registry trade call queue by 1 p.m. Mountain, 3 Eastern. The trades are allowed to go through. Keeping an eye here on email and stuff like that to see if we get we're done for the day.
It's always fun,
communication.
This is the first time I've ever done a live trade deadline show. I know It's not your first, but in years past, watching the trade deadline shows, it's always funny when the trade deadline happens and everybody always says, trades can still trickle in. And everybody's tap dancing and just waiting for those trades to trickle in, and they don't really. So
Yeah, well, it's usually a lot of deadline, minor league, fringe, getting a last. Like, honestly, the Ben Myers deal from today, those are the types of trades that you really typically see come in after the fact. Unless there's like a really big one that you're hearing all day is like, yes, they're getting it done, it's taking some work. Yeah, like you said, typically we do get a flood of trades, but they're 90% nobody cares.
Yeah, that's why they always have filler content, right? I'll always remember TSN Song Guy. I thought he was the greatest addition. He would just make up songs on the spot about any trade that happened. So, we'll see how we kind of tap dance our way through the final 30 minutes. Literally tap dance? Should we get a routine together? We were getting into Sean Walker. That was the return piece. Of course, we'll get through everybody else. We'll get back to Duhaime in a second. But Sean Walker, I think that's a piece that not many people have too much familiarity with, especially East Coast, West Coast. He's kind of more of a second pairing kind of guy. Tell us a little bit about Sean Walker and what we can kind of expect to see with him in the lineup.
Yeah, so, a little bit smaller guy than maybe I initially expected, just because he's a good penalty killer, solid second pairing defenseman for the Flyers. But he's 5'11", about 5'11", 6 foot-ish, good skater. Like, we've gotten to see him these last couple days. The clip was just up there. Good skater, good stick. I think this is Bowen Byram maybe felt like at times. You wanted him to be more than a second pairing defenseman, right? Like that wasn't, you were hoping he didn't cap out at a second pairing defenseman. But Sean Walker, I think he fits in there really nice. I think he's going to play really well opposite Sam Girard. These are both guys that can skate, can make that first pass out of the zone. Good hockey IQ, good awareness. And for Sean Walker being a guy that, production is not his thing, 6 goals, 22 points on the year. Like, he has an offensive, bone to be able to contribute. Mm-hmm. I think I think he's a perfect kind of fit. And for me, if you're stepping back and looking at the Avs, full group of 6, like I think your top pairing, I think that's the best defensive pairing in the league. Cale Makar, Devon Toews. I think there's not a better pairing out there. Mm-hmm. Now, you're gonna have Sean Walker and Sam Girard. That is one of, I'm not gonna say the best, but that's gonna be one of the better second pairings anywhere. Those are 2 solid guys, and I make this argument a lot that there's a lot of teams out in the NHL that would take Sam Girard as a top pairing guy. Like, you're gonna have a really solid second pair, and then Josh Manson, Jack Johnson. That's going to be a really good shutdown, reliable, steady, blocking shots, playing physical, killing penalties. The depth and the balance, I think, of what Sean Walker will add to the middle of that D-core is going to be, I think it's going to be a seamless fit. I think it's going to be a really nice fit.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of comparisons I think can be made between Bowen Byram and Sean Walker. Mm-hmm. Where they differ, I think, is Bowen Byram has an extra little touch of skill.
Whoa.
Oh, no.
Vegas acquiring Tomas Hertl? Holy smokes.
So I think Vegas is noticing, all right, we're kind of not really playing Stanley Cup quality hockey as of late. We gotta make some moves. I mean, adding Noah Hannafin was big. Adding Hertl was big too. I thought he'd never leave San Jose.
Well, he just signed. He just signed. See, like, dude, this is the stuff that I do just find crazy. Like, I like Mark Stone. He ruptured his spleen. It's a real injury. But this is 3 years in a row where Vegas will go into the playoffs close to $100 million in salary.
They're just using the rules to their favor. I don't have a problem with it. So, I know a lot of people do.
And again, so here's what I will say. I know the NHL Like if you're using LTIR, like I know they do check, and they make sure that you're not just.
Mm-hmm.
But like, man, so it doesn't feel like at all like just kind of icky to you that this is the third year in a row they've done it and they're coming off a cup win.
I guess I compare it to different tax write-offs, right? There are just things that are within the rules and things that aren't. As long as it's within the rules, I'm fine with it.
And
here we go. 10 seconds.
10 seconds. 10 seconds to the deadline. My clock actually just ticked over 2-1. So it sounds like we were just saying maybe a big one will come down after. Tomas Hertl to the Vegas Golden Knights, and he's there for a long time. Yeah. Get our tap shoes out. That's a huge move. That's massive.
Well, I think, look, you saw the Avalanche load up. You saw Winnipeg load up. I think Vegas, to really keep up with the Western Conference, if they want any shot, they had to load up on a couple names too. I'm surprised Dallas wasn't a little more active because they're kind of right in that last team push of the top of the West too. So I guess I see it. They're shaking in their boots. They said we can't beat Colorado.
So here is the other thing too, and this is why, like, dude, I laugh when I watch other shows or people tweet stuff out about like you need draft picks. You need to be drafting all those players. I've been saying for the last 2 days, trade every pick.
He said that at least 6 or 7 times.
Trade every pick. What the Vegas Golden Knights have proven time and time and time and time again is the salary cap doesn't matter. You can get out of any bad contract you want. You'll figure out ways to make things work. Like this is the 7th time they've added a player that people are like, well, how can they possibly make that fit next year? And they do some players dirty. They cut some guys. They trade some guys for nothing, and they just keep finding ways to bring in high end players. I really am. The Vegas Golden Knights are showing the NHL you don't need to draft and develop. You don't need prospects. You don't need ELCs. Like this myth of you have to have young high end players coming in on ELCs. The reigning Stanley Cup champions have completely proven, nah, you don't. You just gotta be willing to put them on the table, as Patrick Waugh says, and make the trades.
Sorry for my words.
Did he apologize?
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, sorry for my words, but
dude, this is what's blowing my mind about this. Tomas Hertl is in year 2 of an 8-year extension. He just signed. $8 million. His cap hit is 8.1. This is crazy to me. You don't think you don't see this as this is crazy?
Sure, it's crazy. They obviously are just kicking the can down the road and say, hey, we have to figure some things out during the offseason. We will. For now, let's load up. Because, again, you can't stand pat while you see the Avalanche doing what they're doing, Winnipeg doing what they're doing. If you want any glimmer of hope, you got to improve your team. Because, not like I said, they've also kind of sucked lately.
No, I mean, and wow, dude, that is crazy. So they've got Mark Stone's 9.5 on LTIR, and they're also, I know they were trying to get Alec Martinez to LTIR, so I mean that would free up $14 million for them. Wow.
You feel cheated?
No, it's just I completely agree with what you're saying about like they're watching. Like, look, let's also. The Avs got significantly better in the last 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
This Avs team went from, good team contender, kind of a product of what's going on around the league, to that is a deep team that is a serious contender. And so I totally get Vegas saying, hey, we've got to be able to push. I will though, man. I'll be honest. I don't like that Vegas saw Tampa do it once and have done it every year since. I don't like that.
Hey, they don't call it Sin City for nothing.
It's
a hockey sin.
But I will say this. I do appreciate the fact that every day when VGK management wakes up, they say, going for it again today. I guess we're going for another Stanley Cup. Because I really do, man. I'm so. Oh wow, I did not realize that after last night they had fallen into the second wild card spot.
Yeah, told you they've been struggling.
Because I knew they were getting close there, but I didn't realize that it had officially tipped over. I really am, man. I'm so tired of this, like, traditional way of thinking that you have to have, these prospects coming up. You have to have this, and you have to draft, and you have to blah, 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 blah. Because I think the Avs have actually done a good job of showing you don't need to do that. If you can find players that fit your system, college free agents, if your pro scouting can be solid, you don't need to be doing that. And so I do appreciate the fact that Vegas' management just says, we're going to do everything we can to put ourselves in a position to win a Stanley Cup.
Well, I think you're also seeing that in Pittsburgh. Kyle Dubas is kind of saying that he doesn't want draft picks in return for anything. He's looking for prospects, right? Because A, it leaves out the chance of you probably drafting wrong, and B, it kind of expedites that rebuild a little bit, right? You got players that you can put into the actual lineup quicker. So, it seems like prospects are a lot more valuable than draft picks these days.
Well, what I think people are learning, and this is what cracks me up about when, I saw several people yesterday, like, wow, a 2025 third-round pick for Duhaime, that's quite an overpay. It's like you're talking about a kid that's like 14 right now that you'd be taking the third round if everything went amazingly, perfectly, and that player exceeds expectations. The Minnesota Wild will see that player in about 8 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, cool. And he'll probably be a middle to bottom six kind of contributor.
Sure. Yeah, unless you strike gold somehow, which is rare, right?
Unless you really, really hit a home run. And so to your point, I'm with you. Prospects and players that are closer to pro ready, I will take that 10 times out of 10 over a scratchy lottery. And if you can watch, the Avs have continued to pull players out of college, and they flipped Ben Myers today for a 5th round pick, either more draft capital or hey, there's a mid-round pick for you to use later. Like, the Avs are finding ways to stock these prospect pools. Their AHL team has been very competitive. You have 2 or 3 players down in the American League that you feel very good about. Jean-Luc Foudy just scored his first NHL goal 2 nights ago. And again, the last 2 Stanley Cup champions, the Avs and the Golden Knights, I think, I saw someone yesterday talking about, because the Arizona Coyotes have like 34 picks in the next 3 drafts. Like, and the Avs only have 4. It's like, good, get rid of those. Why are you holding on to them? Those aren't doing you any good. Those aren't helping you win games. Trade them. Get guys in here that can help you. And so I do respect the fact that Vegas has that mentality of, we think we can win. We've been good ever since we showed up, and we just won a Stanley Cup, so we'll just keep doing this. So I do respect that.
Yeah. And I mean, they're in a market that I think kind of requires you to be good.
Yep.
I think if you're in Vegas and you start trickling down the standings, people lose interest, you lose ticket sales, and people go watch the Raiders. I was getting into Sean Walker and Bowen Byram, how I think that what Bowen Byram has in skill, I think Sean Walker kind of makes up in physical play and maybe a little bit of meanness, right? And I know you are of differing opinion than this, but I'm sure there are Avs fans out there that agree with me. Anytime Bowen Byram would get involved in anything, whether it was a big hit or, a post-whistle scrum, I tensed up a little bit. And like, be careful, Bo. Well, now that feeling's gone. I think the Avalanche also did a good job of trading him while his stock is still high, because he's one hit away from being not very valuable at all. So I think I'm kind of just excited for that little bit of, breathability that Sean Walker offers, that defensive group.
Yeah, it's just, like you said, he feels a little bit more rugged. Not that Bo, it's not that he couldn't mix it up. Excuse me. Not that he couldn't mix it up and be physical.
No, he wanted to.
Right. That wasn't the issue, but it was like, oh my gosh, every time someone touches your head, you miss 3 weeks. So please be careful. So it does. It's for such a key piece too, right? Because that's one thing that we have seen, as good as the Avs D-core is, and we just kind of ran through what the lines look like. You get one injury and suddenly you're and this is true of every D-core in the league. You're asking guys to maybe play beyond their capabilities. The Avs maybe have a little bit of flexibility there with Josh Manson being a really solid player as well. Can easily fill in on that second pairing. But, I'm with you. It feels like, and now we'll say this, and Sean Walker will go out and get hurt tonight or something. But, yeah, it feels like you can, injuries happen all the time. It can be crazy and be fluky. We don't have the guy that has had a history of it anymore. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how many pucks Sean Walker's thrown over the glass this year, too. Right, that was kind of Bo's thing for a little while this year. Just a subtle shot at Bo. But no, I think a lot of Avs fans are always going to hold Bo in their heart, right? Stanley Cup winner, and just was a fan favorite around here.
Yeah.
I know I really liked Bo. I really liked talking to him. And
always had good perspective, always had a good attitude.
Yeah, and he's the reason I had to get my suit dry cleaned after the Stanley Cup because he sprayed me with champagne. So he'll always be in my memories for sure. But good luck to Bowen Byram in Buffalo.
Totally.
Let's move on to Jakov Trenin. I think I'm pretty excited for this guy, mainly because we've just seen what he's done against the Avalanche. I like the passion he plays with, right? Jumping into the glass after every goal, it means a lot to him. And just a guy that has some size, kind of knows how to muck it up, and knows how to bury the puck. I mean, that's exactly what this team has been missing is guys that can just finish, and I think Trenin has that.
Yeah, absolutely. And comment came in here. It said, trade from a position of strength to add to a place of weakness. The Toronto Maple Leafs would kill for the Avs' D-depth. I think that is what we have seen the Avs do here, is say, here's areas where we've got a little bit of a glut, and we're going to add to areas we need. And I think Jakov Trenin is one of those where, just kind of almost kind of the way that people described Johansen. Hard, just kind of hard to play against. Big body. Like we said earlier, Jared Bednar said sandpaper to his game. But what?
So I'm just laughing because in my head, I see Chris McFarland calling Barry Trotz and saying, like, hey, you got us good on that Ryan Johansen. You owe us one. Send us an actual version of him. And then they got Jakov Trenin.
But, man, I mean, several people have brought it up. Like, Trenin was a genuine problem for the Avs 2 seasons ago in that playoff series. A lot of energy, just kind of, tough to handle around the net, and a nice little scoring touch. Look, if that guy's your 4C and you're running down the middle of McKinnon, Mittelstadt, Colton, Trenin, I might even feel better about that than I did the 4Cs 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like that's for real depth.
Yeah, I agree. And I think obviously it pushes Chris Wagner out a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. And for a second I was okay with Chris Wagner being on that 4C spot, but even Trenin is quite the upgrade from Chris Wagner. So having Chris Wagner kind of sitting in the background waiting to be used, I think is such a luxury for this team.
Totally.
And considering what we've seen from the Avalanche the last several years, especially come playoff time, you're just seeing bodies start falling out of the lineup. I think they've got themselves quite the insurance policy on bodies falling out the lineup this year. At morning skate, I counted 21 skaters. And that's obviously without Wagner, without Logan O'Connor, and Gabe Landeskog, who was watching from the bench. So a plethora of players that they can use.
Well, and I think that was part of it too. Is you no longer feel like you're one injury away from like, oh man, who are we having to plug in here? You've got depth, you've got options to the point where hey, you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, kind of like off the record stuff. Not off the record, just not on a show. Andrei Burakovsky was scratched for a couple games on the Cup run. Alex Newhook was scratched. Nico Sturm was scratched. Like, they like to shuffle this stuff around, and they like to have options. And, the Avs in the Cup here dealt with several injuries, but there were always guys to plug in. And that feels a little bit like what they did this year.
Yeah, and Coach Bednar kind of addressed that yesterday when asked, like, hey, do you feel like you maybe have too many players to use? Like, how are the players going to feel about maybe losing some ice time? And I loved his answer of just saying, no, they're on board because they know the commitment, they know the sacrifice that it takes to be a Stanley Cup champion. That's our goal, and nobody's straying from that. Nobody's going to be complaining, hey, I'm supposed to be playing more than I am. No, that's just not the plan here.
Not to just keep beating him up, but, like, was there a little bit of that it maybe felt like that with Johansen?
What?
I've been. You can go back and watch the interview. So this isn't me burying him for no reason. He told us one of the first things he said to us when he got to Denver. I've been a 1C my whole career. There's a 1+ ahead of me, so I just got to come in and slot in behind him. Do you think there was any part of that as the struggles started to pile up and his minutes started to be decreased, that there was like a, what the hell? I've been a 1C my entire career, and now you want me, centering your third line, your fourth line, taking faceoffs and getting immediately off the ice if I win them?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I have nothing that would lead me to believe that. I think you've heard my stance on Johansen all year. I think maybe there's a little bit of acceptance from him saying, like, shoot, yeah, I can't do the things I used to be able to do. Mm-hmm. I can't do the things I expected myself to. So who knows how it actually shook out behind closed doors. But no, yeah, I mean, I think it's viable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just interesting with the way that whole thing went. I don't know. It was weird to watch those, because you typically don't see NHL teams do that. I heard someone talking the other day that a lot of times you'll see GMs double down even on players that they brought in. Like, no, I brought in this guy and we got to make it work. Mm-hmm. And it's just funny to see that they said no. Like, this is very clearly not working.
Right.
We got to do something else.
Let's undo half of what we did this offseason. Yeah. And I think that takes a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not bravery, not confidence.
Courage.
But courage. Mm-hmm. To just simply say, yeah, we screwed that one up twice with Tatar and Johansen.
Dude, I remember, I think it was 2 seasons ago, maybe 3. But the Avs went into the season and there was, a hole here and there and people were kind of freaking out. And I had someone make the comment to me that, it was a funny kind of like put it into perspective moment for a second. Because they said, Jesse, your roster doesn't have to be finalized on day 1 of training camp. Mm-hmm. Like, you can go through the season, see how things fit, see how things work. And I know that maybe sounds like a super obvious thing to say. Updated Stanley Cup odds. Panthers leading the way at +700. You can get the Avs at +900 right now, tied for 3rd best odds to win the Stanley Cup after deadline moves.
10 teams they have up there, and Winnipeg is not one of them.
That's interesting. That is interesting. And I think this was this season for the Avs was a great example of that. We put together a group that we really thought would work well. We got into the season. We've seen what has worked. Ross Colton, Miles Wood have fit in really nice as the season has gone on. We've seen what hasn't worked. And what didn't work, they took care of, and they fixed, and they got it to a point where, okay, this will work. Or we have optimism this is going to work. Mm-hmm. And again, what I like about the Mittelstadt thing, I know I kind of said this off the top, is that, hey, whether you win the cup this year or not, that's a player that you've got for a while, and you're going to be able to build around that. And I think that bringing in a guy like Mittelstadt, not that I thought the Avs window was closing, but I think that kind of reopened the window a little bit wider than it was.
Yeah, I agree, which is why I'm kind of shocked to see the Avalanche at, what was it, 4th?
Mm-hmm. Tied 3rd, yeah.
Tied 3rd and best odds to win the cup, because I think they significantly
I agree.
Are threatening the league here. And to your point, we've heard Jared Bednar say it all year, and you're really starting to feel it. Like, the regular season is for kind of ironing all these things out. Mm-hmm. You play the right way, the wins come, but what you really want is to just best prepare your team for the playoffs, and if that means losing some bodies here and adding new ones, then that's exactly what it means. I have, for some reason, they give us the lineup sheets for every game, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Both teams. Front side's the Avs, back side's the opposing team, and their line combinations. The other day, I just randomly whipped out the one from the Avalanche versus the New York Islanders. And I was just looking at the Avs lineup, and just crazy. This was like January. How different that lineup already is.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's so funny because like when they made the 2 deals 2 days ago, Mittelstadt and Walker, I did a quick little live, just like, hey, kind of walking through it. And it was actually live on the stream. I was like, okay, well, that'll be your first line. This could be the second line. All right, that could be your third line. Whoa, all right, that's your fourth line.
Yeah.
This is your extra. Holy smokes. And I kind of sat back, like, while I was on the show, like, this is a pretty good team. Like, they built a pretty good team. And I wouldn't have said that. I thought they were a fine team a week ago. Like, they were fine. But I feel very differently about the Colorado Avalanche
100%.
today than I did last week.
You were the one that was saying this team still can win a Stanley Cup, is what you were saying. And I was sitting here saying, like, I don't think there's moves that can be made that can improve this team so much to get there. I'm wrong. I completely 180'd on my feelings, and I feel like the moves they made were just strong enough to, they're absolutely back into true contender pile for me.
Yeah, and I think true contender is the right way of putting that, because, again, a week ago I felt like, if everything breaks right, and you really get stellar play out of Georgiev, and Nathan McKinnon goes to another level, and Cale Makar goes to another level, and you get some bounces and things like that. Yeah, there's no real team that's like truly emerging. Yeah, you can maybe pull it off, but I'm back at the point where, like, this group could beat anybody. This team could beat anybody.
Yep.
And again, they still got to go out and do it. Casey Mittelstadt's got to come out and perform like a 2C. But on paper, like, this team can beat anybody. And I think that Chris McFarland, Joe Sakic should get a lot of credit, because I'm with you. It was hard to see the moves that they could make. Like, how can they actually spin this into a legit top tier contender? And they found a way to do it, and they lost, yes, Ryan Johansen, but, like, really, you lost Bowen Byram. We're going to wait to see here. I still do think there's a goalie move coming. I just think what we saw at practice this morning was a little too weird. You and I also saw something a little bit behind the scenes I'm not going to put out there quite yet, because I don't know if it's anything. But I have reason to believe, I think there's a goalie move coming down.
Yeah, I guess fill people in if they, weren't adamantly checking their Twitter and making sure they read every Jesse Montano tweet out there.
Well, so the Avs, Justus Annunen was not at morning skate.
All his gear was still in his stall.
All of his gear was there, but they had an e-bug there. They had an emergency backup goalie out there with Alexander Georgiev. And when we asked Jared
if Annunen would be the backup,
right,
he
said, I hope.
Yeah.
And it was just, again, it was just a little weird, and maybe we're a little extra on edge because 2 days ago he said that Bowen Byram was sick, and today he said that Justus Annunen was sick. And then, like I said, there was some stuff that you and I saw kind of off the ice that was interesting, but wasn't anything, conclusive. That just there's a couple different things I'm kind of piecing together here and say they still have a little bit of cap space. Are they going to try to do something here now? Are they waiting in the trade queue right now to get a goalie move finalized?
Yeah, here we are 23 minutes past the deadline. Let's get a refresh and see if there's any goalie news, because it did seem suspicious, and obviously it's a position of need that we've been talking about for months now around this team, and something they just simply pushed aside. I find that hard to believe, right? I find it hard to believe that they simply said, oh no, we just are okay with a 2C and a new defenseman, and that's it. When everybody's known that there's been a hole here in the goaltending since Francouz.
Right. Just real quick, here's the deal on Tomas Hertl. Vegas sends their 2025 first-round pick, David Edstrom, who was their first-round pick last year. They're getting Hertl at 17% retained, and then Vegas is also getting 2 third-round picks, one in 2025, one in 2027. So essentially Vegas's top prospect and a first-round pick. That's some Tomas Hertl and a couple of thirds. That's less than I thought, cost-wise.
Man, Vegas is just getting under your skin.
Well, no, I'm saying that's an impressive bit of business. Like that's a for pulling him out of there for, essentially 2 first-round picks. Like I thought it was going to cost way more than that, and then to get a couple of picks back, a couple more trade chips that we know they'll use in the next couple of years. Look, like you said, I don't like the cap circumvention stuff. But you got to tip your hat. Like that's a tidy bit of business right there.
Yeah, they're doing what they can to stay relevant and competitive in the West, right?
No updates on any goalie news right now, but again, we're at 125 stuff could still trickle in. What is your opinion on the backup goaltender? I really am. I'm at the point where I'm like, Annanen's been fine. He's been fine. If he can give you 8 more quality starts between now and the end of the season, great.
I think people are buying into the 2 shutouts against the Chicago Blackhawks a little bit too much.
I agree with that.
If you look at the numbers and exclude those 2 games, he's still been pretty blah.
I think
even less than blah.
His start against Tampa, I thought, was really strong. And then was it in Detroit? Yeah, in Detroit, I thought he had another really strong start. I think his last 5 starts have been really solid performances. And here's my thing. It's not even that I'm buying into the 2 shutouts. If Alexander Georgiev isn't playing like a number 1 in the playoffs, well, then you're in trouble anyways. Mm-hmm. And if he gets hurt.
Well, and that's what I was just about to say. Alexander Georgiev has proven to be a pretty sturdy fellow. I mean, we haven't seen him miss games for anything other than rest in the 2 years that we've seen him be here. So I think maybe we can confidently feel like he's going to be healthy throughout the playoffs, but you don't know. A stick to the eye could happen, a freak accident, a freak injury,
if Alexander
and then you're in trouble.
Or Sean Walker gets hurt, it's JJ's fault. I just want to throw that out there. And you're right. He has been pretty sturdy, and I go back, like, a lot of people I think kind of like cling to, Pavel Francouz won a round. Mm-hmm. Pavel Francouz was not an average NHL backup. He was an above-average NHL backup. You and I have talked about it before. I feel pretty confident in saying, people have told me there were 3 teams at least that were prepared to offer Pavel Francouz either a starting role or a 1A, 1B type position. Mm-hmm. Like, there were teams that were ready to throw some money at him to come be the guy. And the Avs were very lucky that they had, him and Darcy Kemper. That's not your regular situation.
I think also they got lucky that Edmonton in the Western Conference final was probably the easiest round they had of those 4.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, they just completely, that version of the Oilers, they just completely outclassed. Mm-hmm. Edmonton didn't have the depth. They didn't have the defense. They didn't have the goaltending. I mean, they got to the Western Conference Finals by winning like 3 games, having given up 6 or more goals in just the previous round. I don't know if you remember that matchup. It was Mike Smith and Jacob Markstrom, and it was like, let's see who can make a save. First one to make a save wins. And we had to go to like quadruple overtime to get one. So, like, you're right. Like, there were a lot of things. No disrespect to Pavel Francouz. 1, maybe one of my favorite guys ever to talk to in the locker room. Mm-hmm. And 2, very good goaltender. Very good goaltender. But that's not the norm, and a lot of things fell into place perfectly to make that happen.
Yep.
So I just think, like, if nothing else comes in for the Avs, and it's Annunen and Georgiev, I'm fine. No?
I wouldn't say I'm fine. I honestly would prefer Prosvetov.
Oh, interesting.
That's just me.
Shout out Mark, eh?
But I think if you have to use either of them, I'm not feeling great.
See, well, and I'm with you. And so let me ask you this: Jake Allen was already traded. Mm-hmm. Is there any goaltender out there? And I'm actually already kind of answering my own question because my answer is yes. What goaltenders out there would have made you feel?
Capo Kakkonen.
See, he's mine.
He's my hands down the one I wanted. I think, and I've said this before when we were doing our podcast over there in the chairs. He was so good in Minnesota. Goes to San Jose and he kind of looks a little bit average. Mm-hmm. I think you put him behind another good team like the Avalanche, he pops back into relevance.
Yeah. So when I was halfway through asking you that, he was the name that came in my head. I was like, Well, Kakkonen would have been. To me, I think it was him, and this one would have been a little bit more of like, you would have had to give up a little bit more, to been a little more of a commitment, was Carl Vejmelka. I thought, because he's under contract for next year. To me, I was like, cool, there's your Pavel Francouz replacement, and you can go into next year, Georgiev and Vejmelka, and you feel fine. And
you feel great with that duo.
Right. And it was also funny, it didn't fully occur to me till after. He is also a backwards Czech goalie. So it would have been a perfectly seamless replacement for Pavel Francouz. But I am with you. With the exception of Kakkonen or Vejmelka, my thing with it is, if you're having to go to that guy in the playoffs anyways, you are in trouble. And you know, I don't think Jake Allen is like, oh man, the Avs aren't going to win the cup now because they didn't get Jake Allen.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm confident Georgiev starts throughout the playoffs.
I am too.
I think it's crazy, kind of what I was saying several minutes ago now, several conversations ago, the turnover that we've seen already in this short year, right? Yesterday at Avs practice, it was interesting still being in the room. We finished talking to Casey Mittelstadt. Nathan McKinnon and Jonathan Drouin had just gotten off the ice, and they went and introduced themselves to Casey Mittelstadt. Like, that was their meeting of him. And so I went to Drouin this morning, and I was like, how weird is it for you that you're no longer the new guy around here, right? I mean, you think about it. Let's throw in a goalie. Prosvetov, Annunen, Parise, Duhaime, Walker, Mittelstadt. 5 new guys since the start of the season. That's a fourth of your team.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Jonathan Drouin's a veteran around here.
He's a grizzled vet.
I thought that was interesting, and he had a funny take. And he also mentioned just how weird it is going to be for Brandon Duhaime tonight, playing his former team, right? Not only that, he's like, I try to welcome these guys because it's got to be weird for all of them, especially Duhaime. And it made me think, like, man, we always talk about, yes, this is a business. The players are so good at, reiterating that and handling things professionally. But at the end of the day, this does affect them.
Totally.
It's a weird situation to get traded to a new team, be around a whole new group of guys, and try to get yourself to fit in. So, I don't know. Just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I think Drouin a couple times this year has had good perspective on what it's like going back to a building. Or having to play against an old team, and so I find it interesting that was one of the first things he kind of went to, just because he seems like he has a good appreciation for that. But no, you're right. Like, I was actually thinking about it last night because Bowen Byram played for the Sabres, scored a goal, picked up an assist, and I was like, man, how bizarre! Like, this is yesterday. I was thinking this like 24 hours ago. You remember the Colorado Avalanche trying to get back to a Stanley Cup, and where do you fit, and you're trying to get your play better. And then you hear you're traded. And we see the video of him going in, pulling his, getting his stuff out. He's got the Avalanche bag still and all that. And then suddenly you're in a game for another team, and everything about your life is different.
Your whole world, your whole reality is completely suddenly in a different universe.
Right. Yeah, totally shifted. So we got a comment here. So we're still no news on anything goaltenders. So there is a rule that says for players to be eligible for the American League playoffs, they have to be on the AHL roster today. I think it's at 3 p.m. Eastern.
Interesting. Okay, I see where this is going.
So teams, we've seen the Avs do this in the past where they paper transactions. They send guys down, they're there for like 2 hours, and they call them back up. The thing that's interesting to me, and so we have a comment here, according to Megan Angley, our good friend over at DNVR, Eustace Annunen was added to the Eagles roster in time for AHL playoff eligibility. Is there a reason they would do that if they're not making a goalie move? So here's the part that's interesting to me. We've seen the Avs do this in the past. They've played on the last 2 trade deadline days. Those players that they do the paper transactions on are still at skate.
Yep.
They're still with the Avs. They just get sent down on paper and then called back up. Eustace Annunen doesn't have to be physically absent from Avalanche facilities to be sent down and then called back up on the paper transactions. So good call out by Megan. That is something that you will see today. But again, to me, that shouldn't be the reason he wasn't there this morning. And yes, but again, actually, now that I'm thinking about this more, the back half of this question is there a reason they would do that if they weren't getting another goalie? They're right, because if you're keeping Annunen as your backup, he's your backup. He's not going to play AHL playoffs.
Unless they just plan on calling Prosvetov back.
Right. So, I don't know. It's
Or who knows? Another scenario could be that there was something in the works. It just never got finalized.
You're 100% right. So, Annunen, I had a feeling that we would see the paper transaction today, but I do still find it odd that he wasn't on the ice at all.
Yeah, I agree.
And with enough notice that they were able to get an e-bug there.
I think kind of what you alluded to and what we saw behind the scenes, I still anticipate Annunen being the backup tonight.
Yeah. This is a question that came through that you kind of answered. Do you think Prosvetov... So you'd rather have Prosvetov than Annunen with the Avs?
Yes.
Just in general, or do you think he needs another look and then go from there?
I think just in general. I don't think there's much of a separation between the two, but I think the strengths that Prosvetov has are more favorable for what I like in a goaltender, and the weaknesses that Annunen has are weaknesses that drive me insane. Whereas the weaknesses that Prosvetov has, they are what they are.
I still look. I don't have an issue with them sending Prosvetov down. He's been great in the AHL, and I do think that long term, whether it's with the Avs or whatever, I think that will be great for his confidence and his career going forward. I found it a little odd though. I thought Prosvetov had, I don't remember what his exact total number of starts were. If it was 6, I thought he had 5 good starts and 1 bad start, and they were like, yeah, he's had some bad starts. No, not really. He had 1 bad start, and he was bad. He wasn't good in that game. But I actually thought he was fine the rest of the time. I thought you could see him getting incrementally better.
And that's what I like about him is he really works. He makes Cogliano jealous by how early he gets on the ice. Right? And I know that's a goalie thing, especially a backup goalie thing at morning skate. You want to get your reps in. But nobody beats Andrew Cogliano on the ice.
Right.
Prosvetov did every time.
And he would always be one of the last ones off. One of the last ones off for warm-ups. Not one of the last. The last one off for warm-ups. And that's not something you see very often. The goalie out there shooting pucks just because they want to stay on the ice after warm-ups. Another question that came in, how will Val fit into the lineup tonight? He's going to skate with Casey Mittelstadt and I believe Jonathan Drouin to start. That's not a guy that I'm worried about having to fit back in.
No. If anything, he's definitely going to make them more dangerous. I think Val Nichushkin and Casey Mittelstadt are a nice little yin to yang there.
Yeah.
I'm curious how Jonathan Drouin fits on that line. Obviously, we have the 2 passers, right? But that's actually something else I talked to Jonathan Drouin about this morning, and he kind of brought up, like, hey, when it's time to shoot, you shoot. I'm sure there's a lot of discussion about us both being passers and trying to make the fancy play, but again, that was a moment where I heard Jared Bednar coming out of Jonathan Drouin's mouth, right?
Well, and Drouin has a couple nice goals off nice shots in these last couple games. I don't know though. Does it maybe?
If it was me, I'm Coach Bednar, I switched Lehkonen and Drouin. I like the Lehkonen Nichushkin on the either side of Casey Mittelstadt.
Okay. Yeah. See, what I was gonna say was, do you swap Nichushkin and Rantanen, and you go Lecky, Nate, Val, and then Drouin, Mittelstadt, Rantanen?
I guess if history is any indication, we're going to see the combinations
you're 100%
down these next couple weeks. Jared Bednar is going to throw everything out there. So, we'll see. I think Val Nichushkin getting inserted into PP2 is interesting, right? I think when before he left for the player program, he was on PP1 and dominating.
Yeah.
Remember the way he was tipping pucks and he was just putting up points left and right. PP2 is going to be interesting because we saw Casey Mittelstadt, Val Nichushkin, Ross Colton, Devon Taves, and Sam Girard, which I think is a lot more dangerous of a PP2.
Yeah.
We'll see if Jared Bednar has some comfort using them.
There were, 2 or 3 nice plays that, us sitting there audibly reacted to that PP2.
And a lot of them were Casey Mittelstadt.
Yes.
And his decision making with the puck. But where I was getting is, Nichushkin's going to get back onto that PP1. which probably puts Lehkonen back on PP2. And again, now I think you have two formidable power play units that you maybe don't have to shy away from using PP2 as much as you have been. Plus, you have that weird 3 defensemen on a power play thing out of the way.
Done. Yeah. It. I think Val ends up, like you said, eventually sliding back up to the top. It's more just like a getting him back up to speed type thing. But no, you make a great point about.
I usually do, Jesse.
The blend. I know. About the blending that Bednar loves to do. We're gonna see a lot of different combinations. I like the conceptually. I like the idea of putting a little bit more of a shooty guy there with a couple of really good passers, but we'll see.
I think the weird spot though for the lineup right now is Kiviranta. Where does he slot in? Because now, until Logan O'Connor's back, I think you got to use him.
Do you? And I'm asking genuinely. Like I haven't quite run through the numbers. I don't think so. I don't think you do.
No, I think you're right. I think that with Val slotting in, you no longer need.
With
Kiviranta.
Val coming back in, I think he's 13 tonight, and then I think when OC is back, we have still not been told that the Avs are done. They're usually pretty quick to let us know. That doesn't mean that things, can't be wrapped up and they're just double checking stuff. But the fact that we haven't heard, and I have a crazy knack for saying this and then getting a text or a call or an email. But the fact that we haven't heard that they're done tells me they may be waiting in a trade queue. And keep in mind, there's a very good chance this is like 2 AHL deals. The Avs love to do that kind of stuff on deadline day.
So a trade queue, what does that look like? Are they just on the phone with some elevator music in the background? Just like we would be calling customer service for.
Yeah. So there's a central an NHL central registry that every trade, it's called a trade call. I'm sure people see a lot of the big insiders say pending the trade call. That's essentially where both parties get on the phone with the league, and the league says, all right, from JJ, you're trading A, B, and C. And from Jesse, you're trading A, B, and C. These are the special terms. JJ is retaining this much salary, and on the picks that Jesse is sending, they have this condition. Does that sound correct to everyone? Yes. No, we have this and the other. Oh, okay, we're making that adjustment. All right, so the new deal is blah, 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 blah. Once both teams agree, they read off, you're assuming this much contract, you're assuming this much contract. And then there is also supposed to be someone there who is independently verifying it doesn't put either team over the cap and that all players involved being traded are eligible to be traded. That was what led to the whole Evgeny Dadonov disaster from a couple years ago was someone didn't say this team is on his no trade list. And then after that, they say, okay, this player is now, these assets now belong to this team. These assets now belong to this team. I'm paraphrasing. And the deal is done. Teams hang up. So right now, I believe you submit it electronically somewhere. And then, yes, you have to be in a call queue until your call is fielded by the league offices to verify the trades that are going through.
I just wonder what the cue music sounds like, and if Gary Bettman gets on every once in a while. Your trade is very important to us. Please hang on the line, and one of our.
Your trade is very important to us.
Well, yeah, that's all I have for today's show. You want to just hang around and see if anything trickles in, or?
Yeah, let's go 7 more minutes here. We'll take it to 150. That'll put us officially 50 minutes past the deadline. Do you have a move from either the Avs or anywhere else that you look at that was...
I look at Florida, and I'm just like, how do they keep adding names, right? Were they getting Tarasenko yesterday, and... Was that yesterday? 2 days ago
It was.
now?
It was yesterday.
Adding Okposo. They already have such a strong group there, and I guess I was a little caught off guard by them saying, hey, we still need to add pieces and not kind of being comfortable with the team they had, because... Honestly, I think you ask around the league, it's
a really good team.
Everybody's favorite right now. So, I like what Florida's doing. I think, obviously, the Avalanche. I think if you ask any other pundit that's not a Colorado insider like we are, I think they'd agree the Avalanche have done very well for themselves this year.
And I would maybe even say And we'll have to see where everything lands, when it's all said and done. I'm with you. I think Florida and Vegas. I think there's a chance the Avs will end up as like the most improved coming out of this deadline, where they made the most moves that I think have significant impact on the lineup.
Right. As long as Casey Mittelstadt kind of pans out, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting here saying I'm doubting him.
It's a great caveat to give, though. That we can talk about all this stuff, but they have to go out and perform in the realm of what it is that we're talking about. Like, we're saying, oh, he's here to fix all the problems that Ryan Johansen had. It's like, yeah, but he's got to do that first. Right. We think he can. We think he will. But he's got to go out and do it. We're going to get our first glimpse at him tonight. And I'm with you. I think Casey Mittelstadt's going to be very good for the Avs. I think he's going to be, a really solid player for a long time. But you are right. Can't write that in pen.
We were all excited for the Johansen trade over the summer.
Right.
So.
The other thing too that I just thought we didn't really make this point throughout the show. Not only did they address all of their needs, Chris McFarland actually did it and gave them more cap space in the process of all of this. Like, the Avs actually are coming out of this deadline, and it doesn't matter once you're past the deadline, really, but like, they're coming out of the deadline in a better cap spot than they were going into it. And when you considered what their assets were, how tight they were to the cap, that was what was, making us feel like, gosh, can they really even add anything? The fact that he made them better and helped their cap situation, like, Chris McFarland deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and I think he was on a lot of Avalanche fans' hot seat, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not the organization, but the Avalanche fans were starting to lose faith in Chris McFarland. You look at this past offseason, last trade deadline, people were mad. I think now he's back in everybody's good graces. I'm sure it's harder to find people who are disappointed with McFarland. Again, let's see how everybody pans out. I think everything's going to work out A-okay.
I think he got some good, safe players. Not safe in that, like, they're lesser than what you need, but, like, yeah, like, I feel good that Sean Walker is going to be good in Colorado. I feel good that Casey Mittelstadt's going to be, if nothing else,
better than Ryan Johansen.
Right. Solid in Colorado. Like, this last summer, Ryan Johansen, even Jonathan Drouin to an extent, like, there were a couple of those that felt a little like, unnecessary swings. Like, gosh, do you know, how confident do you really feel that this guy's going to work out? And, like, I think everyone kind of felt that way with Miles Wood and Ross Colton. Like, yes, these will be two guys that, even if it's not immediate, they will fit in. And I think that's almost exclusively what you've added here over the last 2 days is, even if it takes them a couple weeks, a month, these guys are going to fit.
Yeah, I almost see a conversation happening between Bednar and McFarland and saying, like, I appreciate the effort, but you're not getting me Bednar guys. I need Bednar guys.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly kind of what you're alluding to. Like, we made the best of what we could with what you got us over the offseason. Couldn't do it. And I think you've seen that through Jared Bednar. He's been frustrated. He's been tense at times this season. Now he feels like, all right, this is the group I can work with. This is the group I can teach. This is the group that's going to buy in.
Yes, and I actually think that's a great. I think that's a great way of putting it. You've gotten some decent players. I need Bednar guys because Bednar guys are what have gotten us over the hump in the past, and that's what's going to get us over the hump again if that's where we go. Yeah, man, an interesting day. I really do. I think that this could end up kind of being a defining moment for Chris McFarland. The success of the players that he acquires at this deadline will kind of start to define his tenure. One last thing that we're gonna hop off here probably in about 2 minutes. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We want to do more of these as we get closer to the playoffs, and so just make sure you guys are liking, subscribing. That's the best way to support us here at Guerilla. We appreciate all your guys' love, and if you want to keep seeing us do more of this stuff, that all really helps us. Last thing I kind of wanted to talk about. The moves they've made, you and I have been saying it, but this all but confirms we're not really counting on Gabe Landeskog back this year.
I mean, you and I have talked about it. You've said it on SiriusXM NHL Network. And I think you saying it is kind of what has put my opinion in place, and that's you do not want to mess this up.
Yeah. Yep.
It's imperative that his future and the possibility of the rest of his career is a higher priority than this year's playoffs.
Yes. Yep. I agree with you. And I just think that, I think they're taking a step back and looking at it and saying, we're not going to risk him never being able to come back for this, for this year's playoffs. Because the hope is, right, with Casey Mittelstadt in the fold and tweaks that you're going to make over the next, couple seasons, that when Gabe Landeskog comes back, the hope is that you take 2 or 3 more runs at another Stanley Cup with that group.
Right. And they've looked at these last 2 years and said, this has been challenging enough without Gabe Landeskog these last 2 years. Let's not make it the rest of his career that we don't have Gabe Landeskog.
Right, because we wanted to try to get in a few games, here in this playoff run. So to me, that's the one other thing that these moves say is we are building this roster to compete without Gabe Landeskog. If you get Gabe Landeskog back, I don't think it's going to happen this year. Great. House money. Even better. You're even deeper. That's great. But to me, the way that this roster was just put together says this is the group.
Yep. Don't forget there's a game tonight.
There's a game tonight.
Avs are playing the Wild tonight. Wild on the second night of a back-to-back. Juicy stuff for us bettors.
And let me actually ask you this one last thing.
Don't catch me off guard.
That Avs group from a couple nights ago, they look like these moves, like this has been a shot of life for them.
No, that's a good... You're right. I actually wanted to start the show with asking you that.
Sorry.
No. I obviously blew it. Here we are at the end of the show, and it hasn't been brought up. I thought it was interesting that you saw Ryan Johansen out of the lineup for the first time and the amount of jump that team had. Even having guys like Jean-Luc Foudy and Andre Pavel in the lineup, you saw a lot of tenacity up and down the lineup. You even saw that first line play. Mikko Rantanen started moving his legs like something I haven't seen all season long. I think there was a little bit of reinvigoration within the team by trimming some of the fat.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was one of those like, oh shit, like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
Like, let's do this.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what happens tonight, what the result is. Of course, Jesse and I will be there post-game to hit you with all the player interviews and our own analysis after. So thanks for hanging out with us during this live show. It's been fun. Trade deadline was fun. Avalanche made it fun.
Hit that subscribe so we do this more.
Like, comment, subscribe for more great life advice. Thanks.
Follow me for more money-saving tips.
All right, guys. See you later.
Thanks.